I think that was good. That was good.
good.
Yeah. So this is a new cocktail.
Yeah.
And what do you
It's based
call
on
this?
Well, it was based on a drink I saw when we were in Austin.
Aha.
And if there's one thing they like doing in Austin, it's drinking. Big drink in town. So there was like an espresso martini of some sort that you could order for. It seemed like it was on the breakfast menu. And so I just, basic, some kind of coffee liqueur with actual espresso and vodka. I forgot the half and half. So when I put it on yours, it looked like a bird dookied in your drink.
Yeah, Austin. Austin was fun. Because I think the last time we recorded our episode, we were just coming back from Valentango. And then since then, we did 2 more events. That was the SoCal, and there was Austin.
Yeah.
And I think of all the places, Austin did feel the most like a party place, partially because we were among
Next to the frat row. Oh my
all of
goodness.
the young people. My goodness.
Oh boy.
Yeah, a lot of fraternity, sorority type of activity. Lots of
Skin.
Lots of skin. Yeah, lots of skin. And
Boots and skin. Boots and skin and boots and skin.
yeah, and it did feel, I did feel a little bit out of place. You know, here we are, like we're dancing tango. We had to be out by midnight. I don't know why they couldn't have
People
the
were
dancing.
looking at me like I was out of place too. I could see like I would just go out in the corner just to like get away and chill out for a little bit. And, I have a jacket on and baggy pants. And I kind of felt like people were like, what time period does this guy think he lives in?
Yeah, totally. But also, I appreciated looking back at my own youth in a certain way. And I remember making this comment that, man, young people, they still look the same. It hasn't really changed in terms of like what the vibe is. And, you can kind of tell some people feel very comfortable. Some people feel very uncomfortable. There's a lot of like trying to fit in. And in that way, I remembered that time period of my life. And I can't say I missed it. There was not like a feeling of, oh, remember college days? That was so much fun. It was more like, oh, I remember going through that. And I'm grateful that I'm finished with that part of my life.
Yeah, I am too. I don't need to be constantly around girls throwing their rear ends around.
Yeah, you don't.
Walking down the sidewalk.
Well, anyway, it was a long time ago that we were in college, and it was a long time ago that we started tango. And I think for the last couple of weeks, this idea has been brewing on my mind to talk about what would happen if we were to start all over again right now. Because some things have changed for tango, for where we are with technology and our access to information. But I think some things are still very much the same for like what people have to deal with as they start tango and how it's going to evolve, throughout their time learning it. So I thought we would do an episode where we talk about, if we were to start from scratch, what would we do? What are the things that maybe we would do the same way as we did when we started? We actually started both at the same time.
Right.
Which
around 2000 and I feel like I took my first tango class in 2007.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then like I really came into it to do like an extended period in 2008. That's my recollection.
So you've been at it for longer than I have.
Are you 2008?
I've learned this. I learned this now
Just
on
now.
air. as
Well,
we're
I mean,
recording this episode.
I'll have to go back through the diaries, honey. Dear diary, today I danced tango.
This is kind of like us finding out that we actually met before we met. We thought we met.
Oh, that's right.
Because we've always thought we met in 2017, but
That's
we
right.
really
But
met.
then I found a note.
You found a note.
Found a note.
That's right. So, dear listeners, we've just learned that we haven't been dancing the same amount of time. But I think we had a similar beginning because I also did not really get hooked into it right away. I think I started by going to a milonga, and the reason was I had some friends who were into it. There was a guy I was interested in. He did tango, so I just went. And I was not interested in taking classes. It was kind of a very ridiculous idea to me, even to be like, what is like to go to a tango class?
Yeah.
And it took some time for me to actually get hooked into it. So that was, I guess, the parallel.
Yeah, I've heard many people say something similar, that they have an experience where they, do tango and then it's like something else comes up, or they just stick with it, and then at some point they're ready and it sticks.
Yeah. I wonder, because it's either, I guess there's like categories of how people stick with tango. Some people just, they see it, they want to do it. They hear the music and they're immediately sold and they're like going to Buenos Aires.
Right.
Then there's people like us who get exposed to it, maybe take a class or so, but it's kind of like whatever on the periphery. Yeah. And then there's people who might actually see it or take a class or see it on TV, and then 10 years later, 20 years later, they were like, I'm going to try this thing that I saw, 20 years ago. So that's kind of an interesting part of it.
I was thinking, and this I think is maybe a topic that we're doing at some later point in time, like tango people are weird. So there was definitely this sort of feeling early on where I was like, I don't know, man, like this lady's selling me kind of hard on this whole tango thing, and I just don't get why it's like that cool a thing. So I guess later we'll talk about the weirdness of tango. But
yeah,
for
I
now,
think that's a good banter for sure. And I'm trying to think if I had a similar feeling, and I kind of think that I did, because I remember early on there was a particular milonga that I went to, and I was still not understanding how the capoeira worked and how like the whole etiquette and what it meant. And there was just so much anxiety about why certain people were getting the dances and they were weirder than me and I wasn't. You know what I mean? Like there was this judgment.
You viewed it in terms of weirdness?
Well, because it'd be like, obviously normal people, social dancers who are dancing tango, right? And here I am.
Normal people. The normies?
The normies.
What do you mean by normies?
I mean, like, they weren't teachers. They weren't like extremely good dancers. They didn't
the hoi polloi.
Yeah. Just average, right? And as I'm coming in and I'm a beginner and I'm like sort of trying to figure out what it takes for me to get a dance, and I'm constantly evaluating what I look like, and I'm comparing myself. I'm trying to gauge like, okay, am I as good looking as this person or that person, or am I weirder than this person or that? But like, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
So I remember just not being sort of both being judgmental, but just being very self-conscious and
Definitely.
not knowing
there's a ton,
where to fit in.
There's a ton of trying to place oneself in the social order, which is the high school of a milonga. And as you were saying that, I thought, it's one of those things where you come in as a young guy. I was in my late 20s at this point. I could get a dance. Like, I just had to kind of look around and there would be someone available to dance to. The question was, of the people I maybe wanted to dance with, could I get dances with them? And then what tended to happen was, well, when I saw them dancing with people, I would evaluate, well, am I a better dancer than that person or a worse dancer? is that person just a better looking person, nicer, just been in the community longer? Sort of, no. I mean, any number of these things could come up, and I don't know. I think there might actually be something about tango people where it's like they've got minds that go there, as my buddy would have said. You know, like when he gets rejected by the Capaseo, how much does she not want to answer? You know, it's never just a binary question.
Yeah. So it's complex for sure. So when I think about starting tango now, I think those aspects of it haven't changed. Like it's still just as weird. It's as confusing, probably more so. Sometimes it's even more intimidating, I would say. But the first thing that I feel like I would do now that was different from when I started.
Yeah.
As a woman, I would make sure to learn both roles right away. Because I feel like ultimately it was maybe not as difficult for me to go from one role to the next, like over a longer period of time. And I'm here where I'm at now. So like I got here, but I think it would have been much easier for me to understand the whole dynamic of the dance right away.
Yeah.
Because as a follower, I just remember being in the dark, like really not understanding, because a lot of the classes are structured towards leaders, and a lot of the information is spoken about from the perspective of leading the figure rather than following the figure.
Yeah.
And I just thought for a long time that I was sort of dumb. Like I just felt stupid when I was in classes, and people would throw around terms like cross system and parallel system, and I was just like so afraid to admit that I did not understand what those terms meant.
Yeah. Sometimes with a sequence, you could do 3 things, and three movements are really easy when you kind of understand it as, oh, that's a forward step in cross system, right? Whatever. Like with that experience, you can kind of follow along in classes really easily. But if you don't have any of that vocabulary, it's not in your muscles, in a sense, in your brain. I remember actually having that feeling of inferiority when I was kind of learning with a partner. And if I didn't get something, right? And you can be in that state in tango. You can just not get it because it's just like, you know, looking at code, like
right,
just
unfamiliar.
A few lines of code, and it's not too complicated if you read code all the time.
Right.
But for me, I'd be like, man, like here's my bad studentness, like kicking in. Like I really should pay more attention to like cross system and all the ways. What does cross system mean? What relative to different stances I can take, you know, and my partner can take. Am I in cross system? You know, testing those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the things, I guess, that I would think about now is not being a better student, because look, man, I like half-assing things. Like that's just my milieu, you know. So no, I mean, I was thinking like maybe like take better notes. There was a part of me that thought that, but I think
tried notes. It didn't work for me.
Yeah.
I've tried notes. I've tried typing in my phone. I tried writing. Yeah. Not learning both roles at the same time. The other negative aspect of it is that the longer I went not learning leading, the more difficult it seemed to me. And it feels like with following, once you sort of get to a higher level of following, there's so much technique. So it feels like, oh my God, there's just so much I need to learn, so much more I need to understand. And then there's this thought that, oh, I can't even start leading because I have so much work to do with following, that leading, that's too much. And so the longer I waited, the more sort of out of reach leading felt to me. Whereas I think when you first start and you're just doing it at the same time, it's just all chaos and confusion and frustration. But once you're past it, like you're done. You're like past that cloud cover. There's no more turbulence, and you sort of have that more.
And you can see how high you can go.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a lot more schools are teaching both roles. That's the sense I get. When I started, I don't know if the school I went to really emphasized doing both, but I feel like they were early adopters of that. And from a pretty early point, I feel like they got a lot of flack for kind of emphasizing that. And there was maybe even pushback from students like, why do I need to learn the other side or the other role? But I think that's
and that's something that has changed, because back then, the fact that my teacher, who was a woman, knew how to lead was like amazing. It was unheard of. There was barely any representation of women as leaders. So I remember not even conceiving of the idea that I could lead for a long time. So that's different. That's something that's changed over the years. And I think anybody who's starting tango now should just take advantage of that right away and not wait until later. And I would say, honey, I'm curious if you would agree with that. I feel like that's good for leaders too, not just followers, to learn both roles.
No, I'm not gonna wear high heels to a practica, to a class. No, you don't have to wear high heels to be a follower of people. That obviously that doesn't make any sense.
But no, seriously, would you say it's relevant for leaders? Because most leaders actually these days still can get away with not following, because the odds are stacked in your favor in terms of dances.
Yeah.
So that might affect, like, there's so many followers to dance with. Like, why would you need to learn the follower role? But I feel like it pays off down the line, because leaders who understand following eventually actually have so much more to offer, because you can really understand what the follower needs to feel, because you know how it feels. And I find that leaders who know both roles tend to excel in all these other areas of tango. Yeah. Would you agree?
Yeah, there would be value in it. Just like putting yourself in any kind of different situation, swimming a different stroke, right, improves the stroke that you might focus on. You can definitely learn a lot by following. Do you need to do that in a structured way? Sure. I mean, that'd probably be better. But I think where I would wholeheartedly agree, and I haven't really done this too much, and it's not necessarily an easy thing. Dancing socially with leaders, with guys, as a guy. I remember one of the first dances I had with a guy where I felt like he danced with me the way I imagine guys who are trying to do a little bit of a seduction of sorts with their followers might dance.
So it was more expressive, more intimate,
very expressive,
more sensual.
Very sensual. I remember the thought I had, and this is like probably over 10 years at this point, but I remember thinking, oh, that's musicality. Like, that's what you could do, right? Like, over the course of a phrase, like a motif in the steps, clear enough that I, as the follower, recognize what the motif in the steps is. And I was like, damn,
wow,
this guy's good. I don't know if guys are generally gonna dance that way if I end up dancing with them. But, that he was willing, like, that's a special kind of dancer, and I think he leads guys playing too. So that dance was really memorable. Very few like that since. But if you can score a dance with a guy, like, generally speaking, like, if you have to do that first, and then there might be some diamond in that group who's willing to really kind of get into it. And I think that's a bit of a tango thing too, because imagine me, as hetero as they come, honey. I mean, I'm a man's man. Right?
I don't think anybody would argue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Straight up. I like my cacio e pepe just right. And my cocktails non-alcoholic or slightly reduced. But two guys being able to dance in this very intimate way, that's a hard state of mind to get to.
Totally.
And tango, it's a state of mind.
Tango is a state of mind. I think we just need to have a separate banter just on that topic, because it's so rare. It's so rare. I think it's rare for women to experience that with other women. And I've just started experiencing it myself more often as a leader with women, like tapping into more of that feeling for myself. But for guys, it's even less frequent to have that kind of connection. There's a lot of phobia around that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, not me.
yeah, of course not
me,
you,
because
honey,
like
never.
I'm secure as they come.
So, would you like to share something that you would do?
Yeah. So the first one I wanted to bring up was one that I always talk about when people, if anyone asks me about, you know, what's something I should focus on in tango. So I would encourage myself to do it, which I think I did relatively well back then. And I would say just do more of that. Really be focused on the little wins. Find ways to be happy with your state, because there's just so many opportunities for embarrassment and feelings, you know, thinking these people are weird, right? That's coming from a place where, you know, something wasn't right for me. So finding those little wins, you know, if it's just, you know, a particular tanda with somebody that you've been pursuing, you know, make sure you just really clock that and register that. I think traveling for tango is a great way early on to kind of like make some memories and connections to tango and sort of tie it to, you know, a cool thing like traveling. Even if you're not going to dance too much, I think it's great because those travel experiences tend to stick in one's mind, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's funny because I was also thinking for myself, what at the beginning gave me the most opportunity to progress? Like, what was ultimately the thing that created the structure for my success in tango? And I think just the opportunity to dance with as many people as possible. And those wins that you're talking about, it's like you might get one in a night, you might get one in a week, and it's going to come from going and dancing a lot. And so that's something that once I did get into tango and I got hooked, I just went crazy and I just danced as much as possible. And then you collect those little wins. But because at first you might only be doing like one class and maybe going to one milonga, it can feel like you're not getting anywhere, like you're not making any progress whatsoever.
There's a lot of detritus in tango.
And by detritus, you mean?
You know, dandruff, like the sloughing off, like the parts that you aren't really going to remember. But
yes.
It's like,
yes.
It's.
And you know, my second thing was kind of similar, but for me, if I were to go back and do it all over again, the thing that I would encourage myself to do is to do more practicas. Like actually go to practicas and practice with people, especially learning both roles. You know, going in and actually practicing those movements with lots of different people and trying it with different people.
Yeah.
At the time that I started, I didn't even know a practica concept existed. I was in a very small community. We only had, you know, a few milongas throughout the month. And now I feel like practicas are more of a standard in communities. So you'll always, especially in a community that has a pretty, you know, established tango scene, you'll typically have milongas, and then you'll have practicas.
Yeah.
And I think as a beginner, going to practicas is essential, because if you're just going to milongas, there's such a high risk that you're going to base your assessment of your success on what happens at the milonga. And it's it can feel like such an uptight place when you are a beginner. Practicas are just more relaxed in general, even if they have a milonga vibe. Just because it says practica, people are going to be dressed down more.
Yeah.
There's going to be a little bit less uptightness around etiquette, which I think helps. Like, to me, when I started, it was like, I go to class, I practice the move in the class, and then I go to the milonga, and then I just hope I remember what I learned, you know? Whereas when you go to practicas, it's like the purpose is to remember.
Yeah, I remember that people would often just leave right after the class and not stick around for the practica, or maybe just do a dance or two. But the practica really does offer experience in all of those other aspects that I didn't think about for a number of years when it came to tango, which is the social experience of it, the milonga, the buena onda, like
You mean like in a practica setting, you also get to practice the social aspects of tango?
Yeah. I know that, you know, most places are going to say, like, you don't have to do the capaseo, but, yeah, kind of.
You mean, what do you mean they would say that? Like, who would say that?
I feel like at most practicas, you can.
Oh, in practicas, you don't have to follow the capaseo.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I don't want to start any controversy. I mean,
yeah, you don't want to suggest.
I don't want to suggest anybody's doing capaseo the way, other than how they want to do it. I'm just saying, I think that there's this that it actually does happen a little more often, that organizers of practicas will say, look, either the capaseo should be used or not. Whatever that is, it somehow falls in the middle where it's not as big a deal as at the milonga.
Yeah.
Right?
It's definitely not.
Right. So you still do, though, get a sense for how people might be enthusiastic to dance with you or not enthusiastic to dance with you. What that infinite space between feels like between songs within a tanda. And I think that's all up for grabs when it comes to learning too. Like, it's kind of a thing where it's like, yeah, and actually now that I think about it, you know, that's the joy of being a beginner. It's sort of like not even seeing that there's something so interesting about this little aspect of it. Like, what happens in between two songs, between two people, right? Can it be cool? Can it be weird? Can it be all
totally.
those
That
things?
awkward moment of either you just don't say anything, you adjust your clothing, you're not even making eye contact, or there's like looking into each other's eyes and being awkward.
Whoa.
And you know, it's a whole other
It's so fun.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's so fun. Cringy. It's cringy a lot of times, but I just think that we need to normalize the cringe. That's what I had to say to myself, honestly, because I came into tango, I was I had so much social anxiety. People think nowadays that I seem at ease when I go to the milonga, but I started out and I was one of those cases that had like a special needs child, you know, like I had a lot of trouble with a lot of the social awkwardness that happens in tango, and it normalized it for me eventually, you know, just because you go and you're feeling it over and over and you realize, oh, other people experience it too. And no, it's not a big deal and nobody's going to remember anyway. So it's okay.
You felt like a special needs child?
Yeah. 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 Because I was like, I couldn't handle a lot of the like emotional, like I felt like I needed somebody to caretake me and help me. Like I felt very helpless when I first started. And in some ways I'm like, how did I even make it? I don't know. Because I was at a disadvantage in a lot of ways.
Yeah, man. Because if I had known back then, I would have been on the prowl.
Oh.
Which is the case. I mean, not, but point number 2, young men, when you're out at the practica or milonga, look for the ones that look like they don't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
They're terrifying.
Exactly. I mean,
No, I don't want to go down that path.
yeah,
I did have time for something completely different.
Okay.
And my next one is actually in this other area, because Tango seems to offer so many different areas, completely non-social, more from the standpoint of a sport almost, right? Being technically better. And that is watching videos. And so there is still a part of me that also looks at Tango as like, well, you know, if I can sort of dance better, I can move and express myself better, and I could have more magical moments. But, you know, my technique is, you know, it's what I say, B+ student. I mean, here, it might even be
it's a little hodgepodge. That's how I call it for myself. My technique is just kind of hodgepodge.
Yeah. And with great technique, especially access awareness and technique, and frame.
And you're saying axis, not access.
Yeah.
Axis,
being
like
on
your
my
balance.
axis, my balance, and my frame, which, you know, I haven't really paid too much attention to my frame. If those things were like tight, like I can see the possibilities of stuff. And where I see that is in watching other people, watching videos. And there's so much more video available now than there was at the time I started.
It's amazing. It's amazing. You know, we take so many things for granted these days. And I know I'm starting to sound a little dated perhaps, because I say things like, when I was in my 20s and in college, and, you know, I was an art history student, and in order for me to look at images of paintings, I had to go and check out 3 carousels of slides that I would then reserve a room to project and for a time period to like study these paintings, you know. And like now you can go online and on your phone. To me, that was like a mind-boggling transition. And that's kind of what Tango went through as well. Because when I first started, there was a little bit of video content, perhaps, but the quality was terrible. And, you know, it was so unknown. I wasn't even on YouTube back then. I didn't know what YouTube was. And now it's like you have access to so much information when it comes to Tango. Like you can go through and find teachers who are giving courses that before you would have to travel. Like if I wanted to study with Horacio Godoy, I would have to travel to Buenos Aires and endure one of his crowded classes that are taught in Spanish, and you can't even get close to him because there's so many people around him because he's such a legend, right? But now I can take a class with him online. And it was such a radical shift. So nowadays, yeah, watching videos, and especially watching videos in slow motion, you know, that is something I started doing.
Definitely.
When I was really trying to understand as a follower how to look like certain dancers. For me, Juana Sepulveda was sort of the dancer that I tended to fixate. And at that time, I would just watch videos of her dancing in slow motion. And I would just kind of have this experience of remembering those images when I would dance at the Milonga.
Yeah.
So like a song would trigger a particular memory, and that still happens.
Yeah, I guess it shouldn't go without saying that the slow motion aspect of it is really important. I almost assume that if people do watch videos, they're going to watch it in slow motion, but you know,
No, a lot of people don't know.
Frame to frame, there is something in that where you start to connect the dance, and then that becomes the idea is that becomes more fluid in your dance too, as you understand what's the thing I need to do before, a couple steps before I arrive here, in order to make that arrival actually
Exactly.
work.
And you know, I wonder, when I was a follower and I would watch Tango, I would only watch the follower. The leader was like invisible to me. And it was really interesting because my partner and I would watch the same videos, and he would be watching the leader. And so I understood that it was like our brain kind of can only see one at a time, you know, and as a follower, if you dance as a follower, you will automatically look at the follower.
Yeah.
And then recently I started, as a leader to do this work. And I noticed that it was very hard for me to look at the leader for a long time. Like it's like my brain would just blank out. I would see a couple of steps and then my eye would just switch to the follower. And only recently I've become more adept at that just because I've been needing to do it more. Is that similar for you? When you watch videos, are you mostly focusing on the leaders?
Yeah, I imagine that I did focus a little bit on the follower and what her steps were, but I'm sure that I didn't have as advanced an idea of seeing how much I would be able to learn about my steps as a leader by looking at the follower. I didn't do it enough.
So
I could have done it more.
No, but I guess what I'm asking is, for you, naturally, because you are a leader, you automatically were watching the leader steps. So I think that's kind of a natural tendency for people. But then, when you start to want to see the opposite role, most of the time people come up against this wall in their brain where you're like, you just cannot focus on it long enough. Your eye just goes back to what you're comfortable. And I want to emphasize, because for some listeners, I know that they experience this too. They might say, I've tried watching videos, but I can't see it. I can't see the thing. It's all jumbled. And that's how it was for me at first. Just as a reminder that it's actually an ability that you train. It doesn't mean that you can't do it if it doesn't happen the first time. You just need to give your brain opportunity to learn to do it. And if you watch videos, even like once a week, when I do it now and I use video to learn new sequences, it's always the case that I'll look at it and I go, okay, I get it. And then I get up to do it and I come to a place where I'm like, wait a minute, I don't know. What is he doing in this moment? I don't remember. So I have to go back, rewatch it, get that little moment and add it to what I already know and then construct it little by little. And that's how you learn new sequences from video, right? People think it's like a talent. It's like an ability that you see it. It's just you train that and it gets faster and faster,
Okay.
The third thing I wanted to share, if I were to start over and start from scratch as a dancer, that I would definitely encourage specifically women to do is connect with other women. I feel I did not do that for a long time as a follower, because as a follower, you're sort of funneled into the structure of competing for men's attention and you're sort of competitive with other women. And that's how I felt. And now if I were to start over, that would possibly be my first area that I would focus on, like building connections in the community, because without it, it feels very isolated for a long time. I just felt very disconnected from the community. And I felt very inferior and intimidated by other women. I tended to project a lot of my judgment of myself onto other women and felt very defensive. And I think now starting tango there's so much possibility for feeling very isolated and alone. And especially if you go and you have a difficult night at a milonga or practica, or somebody says something to you, or you have one of those really awkward, uncomfortable moments, to have someone to talk to about it, to have other people who have gone through the same thing. And
Oh, girl, tell me about it.
And I, for a long time, considered myself much more comfortable around men than I did around women. So I had a lot of guy friends. But I have to say, being with other women is just very special. And there's something there that actually enhances the whole progress in tango, because it sort of dissolves a lot of the emotional tension and the psychological tension that comes with tango when you have girlfriends who are sort of in a similar boat and we're talking about the same issues. So I'm curious if you feel that way about...
Is there an equivalent?
Yeah. Is there an equivalent for guys?
I don't know. I had some like, I guess I was friendly with other dudes, some more than others. I definitely clocked when, I didn't really talk to other guys, and, maybe there was a little bit of like just a kind of like, you do you, and I'm gonna be over here, and we're not like, we just don't buddy up.
Yeah.
Would I want more of that? Yeah, because I definitely.
But it wasn't
seek that
like
out
crucial
now.
to you.
Yeah,
You
at
wouldn't
the time.
say. Yeah, and that maybe is a difference for men and women. I think for women, I came into contact this in my late 30s that I do have a need for connection with other women, like physically, psychologically, for my health. I need that, and I don't know if that's the same for guys in terms of guys needing that connection with other guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's
That
something
might just be different.
I really treasure and value now. But when I think about it, yeah, I'd probably say like I was kind of a loner type. Mm-hmm. At least as far as guys were concerned. Mm-hmm. And maybe I could have like little conversations and sort of make small talk, as well as the next guy. But when I think back to like what was my mindset, it was probably a little bit more being solo. And did that affect? I mean, I think that's where the focusing on little wins came in. I didn't. Yeah, not quite the same experience. I think that you're talking about. So maybe a bit of a difference there between men and women.
Yeah.
That can be.
That can be, definitely. And yeah, I'm actually curious for our listeners who resonate with this question. Maybe you have something to share about, like, if you were to start over, what were the things that you feel would make the biggest impact in your journey, or some things that you did that you wish you didn't? Because, we're just kind of scratching the surface. So if you'd like to reach out and share your experiences, you can reach me on my social media at IamSoTango, IMSO Tango. And also, please leave a review of this podcast if you are a fan, if you've been following along. We'd love to hear some feedback about the podcast and your listening experiences, and maybe you have some ideas for future topics. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, those are the reviews that really count. And of course, other comments that you might send through YouTube or Spotify, of course, we really appreciate. Yeah, so until we banter again.
So, like and subscribe? Shit, I haven't done this part yet.
Yeah, please help us grow this podcast. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. Really appreciate all of the support. And we'll see you next time. Ciao.